Last year, my company sold more than 10 million jars of hair butter to women who look like me. And the man who flew in to buy that company spent an entire morning explaining my own business to me as though I had wandered in off the street to use the bathroom. I want you to hold on to that number, 10 million jars, because the men sitting across that long glass table had a number too, a number they had decided I was, and it was a great deal smaller. They had looked at me, a 39-year-old black woman who built something out of nothing, and they had quietly agreed among themselves that I was lucky, that I was a face, that the real brains of the operation must be sitting somewhere else in the room. And what happened when they found out otherwise is the story I want to tell you tonight. Because by the time that meeting was over, every man at that table understood, all the way down, exactly whose company it was. My name is Imani Vaughn. I am 39 years old. I live in Chicago, and I am the founder and the chief executive and the majority owner of a hair care company called Zuri Naturals. I named it after my daughter. Remember that because it matters later. Before I go on, let me say something to a particular woman who might be listening tonight. If you have ever built something with your own two hands, a business, a ministry, a household, a whole life, and then watched somebody walk in and assume a man must have done the real work, tell me in the comments what you built. Tell me what you made out of nothing. I want to read it, every single one, because I have a feeling this room is about to fill up with women who are tired of being called lucky for things they bled for. Now let me tell you where Zuri Naturals actually came from, because you cannot understand the insult until you understand the years. It came from my kitchen. It came from my own daughter's head of hair. When Zuri was little, her hair was thick and soft and curly in a way that the whole world seemed determined to make her ashamed of. And I could not find a single product on a single shelf that loved her hair the way I loved her hair. Everything was harsh, or it was a lie, or it was made by people who had clearly never once sat a brown baby between their knees on a Sunday evening to do her hair for the week. So I made my own, on my own stove, with a wooden spoon and a candy thermometer and shea butter I bought in bulk, and oils, and the memory of my grandmother's hands. I have to stop and tell you about my grandmother's hands, because they are in every jar I have ever sold. My grandmother did my hair every Sunday of my childhood, sitting on the floor between her knees with the grease and the comb and the stories. And there was a thing that happened in that hour, a thing that has no name and no price, where a black girl learns that her hair is not a problem to be solved, but a crown to be tended. That hour is the most loved I have ever felt in my life. And when I started mixing butter on my stove for my own baby, I was not chasing a business. I was trying to give Zuri that hour. I was trying to bottle my grandmother's hands. My grandmother had 6 different kinds of grease and a rat tail comb and a way of parting your hair into neat rows that felt like being counted, like being told you were worth the time it took. She told stories the whole hour about her own mother and her mother's mother, women I never met whose names I know only because they came up over my own scalp on a Sunday evening. That is what hair is, for us. It is not vanity. It is memory. It is a chain of women's hands reaching back further than any of us can see, each one tending the next one's crown. The big companies never understood that. And that is exactly why there was a hole in the market the size of my whole life. They were selling chemicals to a people who were really looking for those hands. I just put the hands in a jar. The business came after almost by accident, the way the realest things do. Other mothers at Zuri School started asking what I was using, then their cousins, then strangers on the internet, because a thing that actually works spreads through our community faster than any advertisement money can buy. I started selling jars out of my trunk at the swap meet, then out of my spare bedroom, then out of a little rented space with 2 employees and a label maker. The banks would not lend to me. I want you to hear that plainly. I walked into those banks with a product that was flying off my own kitchen counter, and they looked at me and saw a risk. Because the banks have a number, they have decided we are too. And so I bootstrapped it. Every dollar the company made went right back into the company. I did my own hair on Sundays in a bathroom mirror because I could not afford to pay anybody to do anything I could do myself. I want to tell you about the day the third bank turned me down, because I think a lot of you have lived your own version of it. I walked in with real numbers, a product selling faster than I could mix it, and a loan officer, who could not have been much older than the company I was trying to grow, looked at my paperwork, then looked at me, and asked, in the gentlest voice, whether I had considered that the natural hair market might just be a fad. A fad. Black women have been tending their hair since before this country had a name, and this child wanted to know if it was a fad. I drove home from that bank and I cried in the parking lot for exactly 10 minutes, and then I dried my face and decided that since the banks would not bet on me, I would simply have to be the bank. Every dollar back in, no new car, no vacations, no rest. I bet on myself with my own money because nobody else would. And that decision, the one they forced on me by underestimating me, turned out to be the most important one I ever made. Because when you fund a thing entirely with your own blood, nobody else ever gets to own a piece of it. They made me bootstrap, and in doing so, they handed me the very thing that would protect me years later in that conference room. Total control. Sometimes the door they slam in your face is the door that saves your life. And it grew. Lord, it grew. Because it turns out that when you make something real for people who have spent their whole lives being sold things that were not made for them, they do not just buy it. They become loyal to it in a way that money cannot manufacture. My customers were not customers. They were a congregation. They drove to 3 stores to find my jars. They left me voice messages crying about their daughter's hair. They tattooed the little crown from my logo on their arms. There was a winter a few years back when some flu tore through my little factory and we fell behind, and the jars went out of stock for 3 weeks. And I want you to understand what happened. My customers did not switch brands. They waited. They posted countdowns. Grown women left me voicemails saying, "Take your time, Miss Amani. We are not going anywhere. We will make do with coconut oil and prayer until you are back." Do you know what a company would pay for that kind of loyalty? You cannot buy it. There is no marketing budget on this earth that purchases a customer who will defend you to her own cousins. I had it because I earned it. One honest jar at a time. And it was, though the men from Meridian did not understand this until I explained it to them very slowly, the only thing about my company that truly could not be replaced. By the time those men flew in to buy my company, Zuri Naturals was doing more than $40 million a year. And not $1 of it came from a customer who felt tricked. Because I never once sold my people a thing I would not put in my own child's hair. So understand, I did not inherit this. I did not marry into it. I did not have a partner whose name belonged on it more than mine. I built it, jar by jar, with my grandmother's hands and my daughter's name, and a wooden spoon I still keep on the shelf in my office, where I can see it every day, so I never forget that the most important tool in this whole company was the one I started with. Now let me tell you about the men from Meridian. Meridian Consumer Brands is one of those enormous companies that owns 100 other companies you have heard of and never knew were the same company. And as Zuri Naturals got bigger, Meridian came calling, the way the big fish always comes for the one that grew up fast in its pond. They courted me the way the big ones court you, with nice dinners and a private tour of their gleaming headquarters and a great deal of talk about partnership and family and shared values. And all through it, I noticed the small things, because noticing small things is how I built a company in the first place. I noticed they had done their homework on Tio's background, but kept getting the basic facts of my own story wrong. I noticed the materials they sent over described me as the brand's founder, and face. That little word, face, doing a great deal of quiet work. I noticed that when we toured their labs, the chemist walked us through everything while looking only at Tio, who finally had to say, with a patience I will never deserve, that I was the one who developed the formulas, and would he mind speaking to me? None of it was loud. All of it was a current, pulling the same direction. And the direction was away from the truth, that the company they wanted was built by the woman they kept forgetting to look at. They wanted to acquire us, and I was open to it. I will be honest, because the right partner could put my jars on every shelf in this country. Get them to a brown baby in a small town who could not find them, and that had been my dream since the stove. So I agreed to the meetings, and I flew their people in, and I sat down at the table ready to do business as the woman whose business it was. The man leading their side was named Preston Kane, about 50, beautiful suit, the kind of smooth that has never once had to bootstrap anything. And from the very first handshake, Preston Kane made a decision about who I was, and the decision was wrong. And he never once questioned it, because men like Preston do not question the things that make their lives easier to navigate. He shook my hand, and he said, warm as anything, "We just love the story. It's so authentic." The story. As if my company were a charming little tale and not a $40 million enterprise I had built from a stove. And then, having filed me away as the story, he turned to my husband. Now I have to tell you about Theo. Theo is my husband, and he works in our company. He runs our operations and our logistics, and he is brilliant at it. And he is also, and this is the important part, my employee. I am his boss. He reports to me. We built this marriage the way we built this company, on the plain truth of who is good at what. And Theo has never once needed to pretend he is something he is not in order to feel like a man, which is one of about 400 reasons I married him. But Preston Kane took one look at the table, at the black woman and the black man, and his mind did the arithmetic it had been doing his whole life, and it landed on the man. He started directing everything to Theo, the hard questions about valuation, about margins, about the cap table. He aimed every one of them at my husband, who he had decided, without a shred of evidence, was the one really running things. He would ask Theo a question, and Theo, bless that man, would say, every single time, calm as Sunday, "That's Imani's call. You'll want to ask her." And Preston would nod and turn to me and ask me a smaller, simpler version of the question in a slower voice, and then turn right back to Theo for the answer that mattered. And I sat there, in the middle of my own conference room, in the company I had built, being slowly turned into the furniture, and I felt the old familiar heat come up the back of my neck, the heat every woman listening to me knows, the heat of being erased while you are still standing in the room. And I did the thing I have trained myself to do over a lifetime of it. I let the heat pass through me and turn into attention. Because a furious woman makes mistakes, but a woman who turns her fury into focus becomes the most dangerous person at the table. I stopped being insulted, and I started taking inventory. Every assumption Preston made was a card he was showing me, and by the end of that first long morning, while they thought they had a read on me, I had a complete read on them. I could give you an hour of those moments. The way Preston explained to me what EBITDA was, in that patient voice, when I had been living and breathing my own margins for 9 years. The way one of his people asked me, kindly, whether I would be comfortable with the financial complexity of a deal this size, as though I had not personally built every line of the financials they were drooling over. The way they kept complimenting how articulate I was, and how I was not what they expected, which is a thing people say to you when what they expected was less. And the way, when I asked a sharp question about their real plans for my brand, Preston gave me that smile, the one you give a child who has surprised you by knowing a big word, and said, "We'll get into all that, but don't you worry about the weeds. We'll take good care of your baby." Your baby, my company, like it was a thing I had birthed by accident and now needed a grown-up to raise. Here is the thing about all of it, and I need the woman listening to hear this exactly right, because it is the part the people who do this cannot see themselves doing. Not one of those moments was a slap. Each one was small and deniable and wrapped in a compliment, so that if I had stopped the meeting and named it, I would have been the difficult one, the angry one, the one who could not take a partnership seriously. So you let it go, and you let it go, and you smile, and you take your notes. But I was taking a different kind of notes than they thought. Because while Preston Kane was busy explaining my own business to me, he was also, without meaning to, showing me his whole hand. A man who underestimates you will tell you everything, if you let him. And what Preston told me, in between the compliments, was the actual plan. They did not want my company. They wanted my customers. They wanted that congregation I had built, those loyal women, that trust. And they intended to buy it, strip it for parts, push me out of the leadership within 2 years on some pleasant timeline, and, this is the part that turned my stomach, they wanted to rename the brand, drop the name Zuri, make it something, in Preston's words, with broader appeal. I sat with that phrase for a long time. Broader appeal. I knew exactly what it meant, because I have spent my life translating it. It meant less of you. It meant taking a thing a black woman made for black women and sanding off everything that made it specifically ours, until it was smooth enough to sell to everybody and special to no one. It meant the slow, quiet erasure that has happened to 100 brands my people built and loved and then watched get bought and bleached. And the worst part, the part that kept me awake, was that they were not even doing it out of malice. They genuinely could not see why the name of a black child would be worth keeping on a national brand. To them, it was a variable to optimize. To me, it was my daughter. And that gap between what they could see and what was actually there, I realized somewhere in the middle of that sleepless night, was not only an insult, it was my leverage. They could not properly value the very thing they were buying. And a person who cannot see the value of a thing will always undervalue it at the table. Take my daughter's name off the company I built for her, because a focus group somewhere thought a different name would sell better to people who were never my people in the first place. And I want to tell you that I stood up right then and threw them out. But I promised you the truth. And the truth is that I almost signed. The number they were offering was a number that changes a family for 4 generations. It was the kind of money my grandmother, doing my hair on that floor, could not have dreamed in her wildest dream. And I sat at my kitchen table that night, the same kitchen where I first mixed the butter, with that offer in front of me, and the voice started up. And this voice was clever, because it dressed itself up as wisdom. It said, "Imani, take the money. You have proven your point. Who are you to turn down generational wealth over the name and over your pride? Maybe Preston is right. Maybe you have taken this as far as a woman from your kitchen can take it, and the grown-ups really should run it from here. Maybe wanting to keep control is just ego. Maybe the smart, humble, grateful thing to do is sign and take the check and be glad they came at all." That voice almost had me. Because the cruelest part of being underestimated for years is that eventually a little piece of you starts to wonder if they are right. They had spent a whole courtship treating me like the lucky face of my own company. And a small, tired part of me had started to believe maybe I was. Maybe I did need them. Maybe gratitude was the only correct response to a powerful man's offer. Theo found me at that table at 2 a.m. He did not argue with me, because that is not how we work. He just sat down and said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. You know that. But I watched you mix the first batch of this on that stove right there. I have never in my life seen anybody need permission from a man in a suit less than you do. And I looked at the stove, the actual stove, still right there in the kitchen where it had always been, and I thought about generational wealth and what that phrase really means. And I realized something that settled it. The generational wealth was never going to be the check. My grandmother did not leave me money. She left me her hands and what they knew and the bone-deep certainty that I was somebody. That was the inheritance. It had already made me a fortune, and no man in a beautiful suit was going to talk me into trading the thing that made the money for the money itself. And then my daughter came into the kitchen for a glass of water. Zuri, 10 years old now, the girl whose hair started all of it, the girl whose name was on the jar. She came in her nightgown, and she saw the papers, and she could not read the legal language, but she could read the one word she knew, her own name on the top of the company. And she said, "Mama, is that the company named after me?" And I said, "Yes, baby." And she smiled, this proud, sleepy, 10-year-old smile. And she got her water and padded back to bed. And I sat there, and I understood that I had been about to let a man I met 3 weeks ago erase that smile from a jar to please people who did not even know my daughter existed. I called my mentor that night, an old businesswoman named Miss Odetta, who built and sold 3 companies before I was born, who had taken me under her wing because somebody once should have taken her. And I told her everything. The offer, the renaming, the way they talked past me to Theo, the voice telling me to be grateful. And Miss Odetta was quiet for a moment, and then she said the thing I had needed somebody to say out loud. She said, "Baby, they are not confused about who runs that company. They know exactly who you are. The disrespect is not a mistake. It is a negotiating strategy. They are trying to make you feel small so you will sell cheap and sign away your control without a fight. Don't you give a powerful man your power just because he had the nerve to ask for it nicely. Don't give a powerful man your power just because he asked nicely." I wrote that on my heart, and I went to bed, and I did not waver again. The final meeting was in our biggest conference room, their whole team on one side, my side on mine. And it began exactly the way the others had. Preston aimed his opening at Theo, some smooth thing about how he hoped the family was ready to take this exciting next step. And Theo, one last time, looked at him and said, "You keep talking to me, Preston. I keep telling you, it's her company. It's her call." And Preston gave that little chuckle and turned to me to begin the part where he managed me into signing. And that is when I finally stopped letting him. I did not raise my voice. I have learned that the woman who actually holds the cards never has to. I said, "Preston, before you go on, I want to make sure we are negotiating with the right understanding of the facts. So let me lay them out, and then we can talk like the principals we both are." And I watched something flicker across his face, the first crack, because I had used the word principles, and a face does not say that word. The whole energy of the room turned on that one word. Up until that moment, they had been running a script. The script you run on a seller you have decided is overmatched, where you stay warm and patient and quietly in charge, and you walk her gently toward the number you already picked. And the script only works as long as she keeps playing the part they cast her in. The instant I stopped playing it, the instant I spoke to them as an equal who had read every clause they assumed I had not, the script had nothing left to grip. I could see it in how they sat up. I could see Preston's second man quietly slide a folder back into his bag, the one holding whatever clever pressure he had been planning to spring, because it was suddenly useless against a woman who was not afraid of the table. And then I told them what they were actually buying. I told them I held the majority of the equity in my company, that I had never given up control, not to a bank, not to an investor, not to anyone, because I had built it on my own dollars precisely so that no one could ever do to me what they were sitting in that room trying to do. I told them the formulas were mine, protected, that the trademarks were mine, including, especially, the name Zuri. And then I told them the thing that finally drained the smile off Preston Kane's face for good. I told them that the real asset they were trying to buy was not a factory or a formula. It was the trust of several million Black women who did not buy a product, they bought me. My word, my daughter's name, the promise that somebody who looked like them and loved them had made this with her own hands. And the moment they stripped my name off it and renamed it for broader appeal, the moment they pushed me out and let a focus group run it, that trust would evaporate, and they would be left holding an empty jar with a stranger's label on it, having paid $40 million for a congregation that would walk out the door the day it found out I was gone. The room was very quiet. Teo was trying not to smile. The young woman on their team, a dealmaker named Dana, who had been watching all of this with a face I had clocked early, was looking at me now like she was witnessing something she would tell people about later. And then I told them my terms, not their terms, mine. I would consider a partnership because I still wanted my jars on every shelf in this country for that brown baby in the small town. But I would keep majority control. The name Zuri would never come off the company, in writing, forever. My team stayed, my formulas stayed mine, and the price would reflect the truth of what they were buying, which was not a lucky little brand, but the single most trusted name in its market, built by the one person who could not be replaced without destroying the very thing that made it worth buying. I slid my own number across the table, and I said, calmly, "That is the deal. You are welcome to take a few minutes, but I am not going to sit here and be managed into selling my daughter's name for less than it is worth. So if those terms are a problem, I understand, and we can shake hands and you can fly home." And I started, just slightly, to gather my papers, like I was ready to walk. Because I was. Preston Kane asked for the room. They huddled, and when they came back, the smooth was gone, and in its place was something I had not seen on that man one time in 3 weeks. Respect. Not the warm, fake kind, the real kind, the kind a certain sort of man only gives you after you have made it impossible for him to give you anything less. He said, "Imani, not the story, not your baby, Imani." He said, "You're right. We misjudged this. Let's talk about your terms." And we made a deal, my deal. I kept control of my company. My daughter's name is on it, in a contract, forever. My jars are going to that small town, and the men who flew in, certain they were buying a lucky woman's hobby, flew home having paid full price for the lesson that she was the most formidable person in the building the entire time, and they had simply been too busy talking to her husband to notice. Preston Kane never apologized for the 3 weeks of talking past me. Men like that rarely find the words. But on his way out, he stopped, and he looked at the wooden spoon on my shelf, the one I keep where I can see it, and he asked what it was. And I told him it was the spoon I built the whole company with, on my own stove, mixing butter for my daughter's hair. And he looked at it a long moment, and he nodded, slow. And I believe that spoon taught him more in 5 seconds than I had in 3 weeks. Because a man like Preston has spent his whole life around inherited things, and bought things, and things that other people built. He had simply never, until that morning, had to stand in a room with the actual hands that made the thing. We closed the deal a few weeks later, on paper, with lawyers, the right way, and I read every single page myself, twice, the way Miss Odetta taught me, because a contract is just a promise somebody wrote down, so it could not get convenient and disappear. And when it was done, I did not pop champagne. I went into my kitchen, to the stove, and I took down the wooden spoon, and I sat at the table where all of it started, and I called my grandmother, who is old now and does not always know the day, but who knew me. And I told her, "Granny, the company we built is going everywhere now, and your hands are going with it." And she said, in that same voice from the floor of my childhood, "Course they are, baby. They always were." So let me leave you with this. Every woman out there who ever made something out of nothing and watched the world hand the credit to a man, they are going to call you lucky. They are going to call your life's work your little baby, and your expertise a charming story. And they are going to look right past you to whatever man is nearest, because it is easier for them to believe a man built it than to sit with the truth of what you are. When that day comes, do not get loud and do not get small. And whatever you do, do not let them talk you into being grateful for less than you are worth. You let them underestimate you all the way to the table if you have to, and then you lay the facts down, calm and clean, and you make them deal with the principle. Because the hands that built the thing are the hands that hold the power, no matter who they keep talking to. Keep your control, keep your name, keep your grandmother's hands in every jar. I am Imani Vaughn. I built a $40 million company with a wooden spoon and my daughter's name. And the day the powerful men came to take it, they learned the same thing my grandmother taught me on the floor between her knees. What you make with your own hands, nobody gets to tell you it is small. If you have ever built something they refuse to believe was yours, get down in the comments and tell me what you made and what it cost you. Tell me the thing you grew from nothing. Somebody scrolling tonight is sitting at a table being talked past right this minute, and she needs to see a whole room of women who know exactly what she is holding. And if this one reached you, you already know how to find the next. Go tend your crown, and do not you ever let them rename what you built.